I'm Art Spizak. I'm the director of the honors program here, and I'm the host for today's program. ICFRC hosts community programs to address topics of international interest. We thank our members, volunteers, and interns for making these forums possible since 1983. Ready for what happened in 1983? I don't know how Ed keeps getting these, but every week he comes up with a new one. That was the year that the first 3D printer was introduced. Thank you, Ed. I want to take a moment to acknowledge our university and community supporters. First, we have the University of Iowa's international programs. I don't know if we have the director here. No, I don't see him. University of Iowa's honors program. We do have the director here. That was a little awkward. University of Iowa Center for Public Policy and the Stanley UI Foundation Support Organization for their financial support. We also have special sponsors for today's program. Janet Linus and John Wadsworth and Ed Zastro. Also, I want to thank, City Channel 4, there they are back there, as usual, for professionally recording our programs for cablecast on City Channel 4 or 118-2. Also, UI Libraries Digital Archives. And as we prepare to hear from our three distinguished international studies majors, I want to recognize an individual who has blessed three students with her wisdom and counsel. ICFRC member and associate director of the International Studies program at Iowa, and I know she's here, it's Carmen Berger. Carmen? Where's she at? She is. Carmen, put up. There she is. Thank you, Carmen, for your guidance for these students and so many others each and every year. Now it's my pleasure to introduce our speakers. And I'm going to introduce in the order of their talks. They came up with this order themselves. First, Daniel Valentin. He's an international studies major. He's focusing on development in Islamic and Middle Eastern studies. He has a minor in Arabic and a writing certificate, too. He studied abroad in Fez, Morocco, Pondicherry, India. He's fluent in Spanish and Arabic. That's neat, Arabic. In his time as an undergraduate, he has held positions in student organizations around campus. He's a student clerk for the University of Iowa Healthcare. He's also an ESL tutor for Kirkwood Community College. He enjoys writing fiction and personal nonfiction stories, camping, backpacking, and letter writing. So please, well, shall I introduce them separately? I'm thinking, yes, okay. So first of all, we'll hear from Daniel. Please help me to welcome.
I just ripped his sheet. Sorry about that. Welcome, everyone, to the peak of my career. No, let me start by saying what an immense honor it is to get to present at an ICFRC lecture. To help prepare, I was told to speak as if you're speaking to your best friend, not a room full of people. But my best friends know that I'm a lot to handle, so I'm just going to pretend you're a regular audience. I'm going to pretend you're a regular audience and let the chips fall where they may. I've been an intern here for a few years, like these two. I make the preview and trivia cards at your table. If you have any complaints about the trivia, you can always email me at rachel-maggi@uiowa.edu. In my international studies major, I've focused on development in Islamic Middle Eastern studies, like Art said, but it was the latter that led me to my first experience abroad, which was Fez, Morocco, like you said. The city is home to the oldest continually operating and first degree earning university in the whole world, Jamiat al-Qarawiyyin, founded in the Old Medina in 859 AD. During the summer of 2016, I spent 6.5 weeks living with a host family deep in the labyrinth that is the Old Medina. We spoke only Moroccan Arabic, sometimes in modern standard Arabic if I got confused. I would walk to the new city and back each day to study advanced level Arabic at the American Language Institute in Fez, or ALIF. It was my first time leaving the United States, my first time on an airplane, and I'm still so glad Morocco was my first destination, and I'll tell you why. There were 3 small interactions that I had on my first international experience that left a profound impact on me. These were all with complete strangers, mind you. The first took place after school on the first day. Moroccan students would see international students from the US or Europe, sit us down just to talk and practice their English. One of the boys saw me studying at a table in the green and blue mosaic courtyard. I remember how excited he looked. His English was distinctly eloquent and much better than that of most native English speakers I know. He wanted, it's true, he wanted to know what I thought of Morocco because he already had a pretty good view of the United States, even though it was the 2016 primaries. When he asked me what Americans think of Moroccans, conversation screeched to a halt. I did tell him about the stigmas and stereotypes facing Muslims in America. First, he was confused. He had never heard this. I told him lots of Americans sadly harbor negative feelings against the Islamic community, out of ignorance. He was horrified, as if he was completely unaware, scrambling to make sense of it. I shrugged and told him I knew better. He told me that regardless of what happens in other Islamic countries, the United States and Morocco have always been in close relations. This was news to me at the time. Most people I talk to can't even point to Morocco on a map, even when I tell them it's the one south of Spain. This conversation was the motivation behind my honors research thesis paper, which investigates why in recent history, the United States and Morocco hold such positive relations. It only occurred to me to study this after Brett Cloyd advised my classmates and me to pursue what he calls beautiful questions when doing research. I'm pretty sure that's what I've done, and it's the only academic paper I've ever written that made me a little emotional when finishing. So thank you, Brett. The next meaningful interaction I had took place at night in the northern Sahara Desert, 7 hours south by bus. After riding on camel caravan for 2.5 more hours, sand occasionally blowing on our faces, my fellow students and I sprawled around a camp in a small oasis, and then some of us crawled up an enormous sand dune to get a good view of the stars. I saw 7 shooting stars that night. At that point, I'd gotten to know everyone pretty well, except one. I sat next to her, and she introduced herself. I remember she jumped right into religion, telling me she grew up in a very Christian family, but had recently become a devout Sufi Muslim. I had never met a Sufi Muslim. I asked her about the transition, and she told me the whole story. I was astounded at her in-depth knowledge of all sorts of different religions and systems of faith all across the world, large and small, and in such fine detail. By all accounts, she was more of a theologian than any professional theologian I'd met. Then she asked what I was. She had never met a non-believer. I told her I grew up in a Catholic family, but nowadays I'm not really religious or spiritual at all. I like being honest about that kind of thing. It turned out she had never met a non-believer. I usually expect someone who hears my worldviews to, be uncomfortable, maybe correct it and assert their own faith-based one. Not her. She began asking me about my worldview out of curiosity, and I asked her about hers. We talked for hours just to get a clear picture of the other. We talked about what it really means to live a life beyond ourselves, the pursuit of pursuing morals, like the point of pursuing morals, if there even is one, power dynamics and influences in different religious establishments, and what a perfect world might look like. No interference, no filters, no censorship, nothing held back. I don't get to do that here in the Midwest. Truly, my only issue with that conversation was that it ended. This made me stop focusing so much about how people choose to identify and start observing how people's identities get manifested in their different behaviors. I guess what I'm trying to say is that a Sufi Muslim made me a better non-believer. We had similarly great conversations when we got back to Fez, however few. She is very much just a world traveler, so she had to go. I kept this discussion in my mind in the last few days of being president of secular students at Iowa, when we all put on a panel to help dismantle stereotypes and hear stories from 6 different religious communities. We heard from a Christian, a Jew, a Muslim, a Mormon, a Baha'i, and an atheist. When I told my dad about this, he thought I was setting up a joke. The last interaction took place in the Alif Riyadh in the Old Medina during Ramadan. After the cannon went off at exactly 6:30 p.m., we began eating iftar, or futur in Morocco. Dinner here means breakfast, literally break fast. To prepare, community members, including me, would run through the markets and find bread, sweets, dates, and tons of clean water for everyone to drink. It was great for bonding and learning the streets. My favorite food, harira, which is a vegetable soup with chickpeas, often made an appearance at futur. There was never enough of it. Nothing good ever lasts. I ate with various residents of the old city that night, getting to know them. I could see one stranger, though, was making a point not to talk to me. That's fine. My friend Samir noticed this and asked the stranger why he was reluctant to speak to me. And the stranger looked right at me and he said, "You Americans are all the same. You come to Morocco, we meet each other, we become friends, and then you leave. And I never hear from you again. I'm just another item on your resume." He was right. That's exactly what we do. I didn't know any better at the time, and I wish I did. Judging by what he said, this was routine for him. He didn't get hurt by this once, but over and over again, by University of Iowa students. Maybe I'm just being a sap, but I at least started questioning the ethics and intentions of partaking in international programs. They very much just give you a thing to do somewhere else, but they don't take into account sincerity on our part as individuals. In fact, I think sometimes we get enabled to be insincere through photographs, as if people abroad exist to be the items in our selfies and other photos that we post on social media with cute little captions for people to see. And this man certainly wasn't the odd one out. This kind of thing is very common. And it doesn't matter what program you're in. It's always up to the individual to examine the effects of their actions. Because there's nothing wrong with documenting your trip, just so long as you don't dehumanize anyone in the process. I don't see what the big mystery is there, but I guess it's harder for some people than others, and that's fine. I think this experience made me focus on being more deliberate and invested in my friendships, to cherish the time I spend with people in my life so that I don't accidentally utilize or exploit them, making them feel like the man across from me at dinner. After all of this, I spent 2 years preparing a Fulbright application to teach English in Morocco. I didn't get it. You don't hear about the ones who don't get it. What's there to talk about? And the responses are all the same, too. People said to me, "Their loss. What could they be thinking? You'll find something even better, and they'll regret not taking you." It's entirely possible that I didn't qualify. 12 spots open, and at least 80 people apply every year. I'm an undergrad, for goodness sakes. And some of the people that apply for this thing have way more outstanding credentials than I do. My time preparing just clearly wasn't enough, and that's all right. I gave myself a chance. Now I was asked if I'm going to apply again for somewhere else, and I said, I don't know. What I should have just said was no, to be honest, because it wasn't about being a Fulbrightee. It was about doing great work in a place I love. And that's another thing. I've felt a lot of pressure to have something big and important lined up for after I graduate, and I'm still figuring it out. And I think that's an important point to make, because there comes a point when life stops caring about our visions. Even after we, put all this work in applying. And I'm not going to stop applying, I'll tell you that. Doing nothing isn't an option. Just based on what I've learned through my international studies education. I'm applying for Peace Corps to teach English, hopefully in Albania. And in the meantime, there are some internships in DC and New York that I'm also looking at. Maybe I'll get a work visa for Morocco or some other Arabic-speaking country. Maybe I'll get TEFL certified and teach English abroad with authority. These are the kinds of things I'm considering, knowing these experiences lead to new possibilities. Meanwhile, I have to graduate. And then if I'm lucky, I'll get to continue working on a fiction story I've started. Lots to do, lots to do. Anyway, I'm keeping an open mind as I start my career. I'm looking to approach it all the same. I'm looking to approach it the same way I did this speech. Because even after all my hard work, I'm eventually just going to have to roll with things. But I'll be better for it, being sure to take my stories and my experiences with me and continue having new ones.
Our second speaker is Ashley Chon. She's an international studies major focusing in East Asia and post-colonial diasporic studies. She has a minor in anthropology and a writing certificate, so there's 2 writing certificates. She's moved 7 times across Southeast Asia and North America before coming to Iowa to pursue her undergraduate degree. As she puts it, she's most confident in Korean, native Korean, and French, and is working on her Mandarin and Spanish language proficiencies. She's also an iCrew Research Fellow with the International Writing Program. Beyond academics, she's a member of a string quartet within the School of Music. She's part of the executive board of the Translate Iowa project, and she performs at local venues as one half of a musical group called the Dashi Project. Please help me to welcome Ashley.
Hi, everyone. We keep joking that as interns here, we're usually used to eating kind of in the back or in the kitchen even, scrambling, and we usually don't get tables. But it's really nice to have a table, you know, and not have to like cram everything in before our 12:30 class and like run out with the samosa in hand, you know. So anyhow, I'm here to speak about my international experiences, however, and not just my experience as an ICFRC intern. So before I start, I first wanted to discuss the word international itself. So the word international has its connotations, but then also its etymological meaning. So when you derive it all the way back to its root. So often when we talk about international, we talk about something that's, well, from an American perspective, something that's not America, something that is abroad, something that is foreign, something that is different, something that we're not used to. If you really want to get down to it, you could even say something that's other. But then we look at the word itself. So international has two parts to it. Inter meaning among, and then nation. Well, and then all, but anyhow. And then nation. So nation also has its connotations and its etymological meaning. Nation, in a political context, means a group of people who have a common ancestry or a common history. But if you actually go to the etymology of the word, it comes from an old French word which actually means home. And so if you put it together, international means among different homes. But my question is, what happens when you have multiple homes and they're multiple homes in one person? What happens when for one person going to Korea, it is an international experience, but for me, it's something relating to my heritage. It's not something that's foreign or other. So, my name is Ashley Chong. I am a daughter of two Korean immigrants, one of who is there, my mom's in the audience. And so, yes, hi mom. So I was born in Peoria, Illinois, which is about 2.5 hours from here. We didn't stay there very long because then we went to Singapore, where my brother was born 2 years later, and then Manila, Philippines, Jakarta, Indonesia, Singapore again, back to Peoria, where is the headquarters of Caterpillar, which is where my dad works, and then up to Montreal for 3 years before I settled here in Iowa City for my undergraduate career. So it's pretty clear that my sense of home is very complex for several reasons. First of all, when someone asks, where are you from? Generally, they're not really asking where I'm from, they're asking my heritage. And so I first have to say, okay, I'm ethnically Korean. But then even when I answer that question, this question still is, where's your hometown? And I still can't really answer that without giving a whole explanation about, well, I lived in da-da-da-da-da. So usually I just say, I've lived in Peoria for the longest, but I feel the most at home in Montreal and in Iowa City. So when I came to the University of Iowa, I actually came as a biomedical engineer. That lasted for 1.5 years. And then I switched into international studies. And I think this was in part because I took Civilizations of Asia Korea class, which was incredible. And I've always loved the humanities. And that gave me a glimpse of what does it look like to study this on a college level. And also because I just was always curious and wanting to know more about myself as an Asian American, as part of a Korean diaspora, which diaspora meaning people who are living beyond the country of their heritage. I was just wanting to spend more time to do that. And so I declared my international studies major and did it in East Asian studies and post-colonial diasporic studies, which is very interesting because it feels like I am, I'm the person behind the microscope, but I'm also the person on the slide that the microscope is analyzing. So I'm simultaneously studying people like me, but also having this moment of like, that's me. So for example, in the first post-colonial class I took, I was the only person who was diaspora in that class, and we would be discussing theories, and I would be kind of getting emotional, like, oh my goodness, that's totally what I went through, or that's me. But you know, I try not to get too emotional in it because we were talking about and analyzing it and what does this text say. So that was a very interesting experience for me. But alongside of my academic exploration of my identity, I also am a very creative person. So as Art mentioned, I play the violin, and I've been in a string quartet or string ensemble since freshman year. So there's that aspect, but then I also wanted to find other creative venues to explore my identity. So I started translating for the Translate Iowa project, even though my Korean was not up to par, but it's okay because I had people to help me. And then I also started a musical duo with my friend called the Dashi Project, in which we would do a lot of mashups in English and Korean. She speaks Hebrew, so we would do a song in English, Korean, and Hebrew, and then sometimes you throw in Hindi, because why not? So, that was another creative venue for me. And then on the writing aspect, I would write poetry, mostly in English, but also throwing in some Hangul, which is the Korean text, kind of as a way to represent the code switching that was constantly happening in my mind on the paper. So for sophomore and junior year, the creative and the academic processes to kind of work through my identity as a Korean diaspora were separate, but then I wanted to bring them together. And so I was extremely lucky through some connections that kind of just happened. I ended up having an internship with the International Writing Program. Kathleen is here somewhere. Yes, in the back. There's my lovely mentor who was very patient and fantastic with working with me. And with my internship, which I started this summer before my senior year, I was able to merge both the academic and the creative side together. So I was doing research for the Origins podcast, in which we interviewed a select number of the fall residency writers who come at the beginning of every year from 30 plus countries. And I got to creatively read their texts and kind of ask questions like, oh, what was this style and what was this vocabulary choice or whatnot that you used? But I was also able to apply my international studies background in asking questions about the social, the political context, the cultural context in which these stories were being written in. So that was a very neat opportunity for me to just merge the two together. But then on top of that, I had a fantastic opportunity this past fall to also have a hand at curating. And so as I already mentioned, I do have connections in the School of Music because I've been participating in a chamber ensemble since my freshman year. And I've very close to the professor, Professor Oakes. Hopefully you'll watch this later. And so every year, so there's the School of Music, and then there's the University of Iowa String Quartet Residency Program, in which we bring 4 professional quartets to come every year to have residencies, very different quartets from very different backgrounds. And this past fall, the first group to come was the Chiara String Quartet. And so a year ago, when Voxman was opened up, the International Writing Program and the String Quartet Residency Program decided to do a collaboration together. And so I was there at that. I actually had a very surreal opportunity where I spontaneously read a poem I wrote on the stage. That was crazy, but that was kind of a forerunner that I would actually be able to help manage the collaboration that would happen. So what happened is working with the Chiara String Quartet, and then also with 3 writers from the fall residency, 1 writer from South Korea, 1 writer from Thailand, and 1 writer from Egypt. We made this event, and it was called Memory as Creative Fuel, because the Chiara String Quartet is very unique in that it performs completely from memory. So they don't even have music stands there. And it's a very visceral experience because you are kind of drawn into it, and it's a bit uncomfortable at first, but then it's very engaging. So they perform from memory. And then we decided, in speaking with Kathleen, we were like, what writers do we think who thematically explore the concept of memory? And so we picked these 3 writers. And I helped in that process, and I also listened through the repertoire that the quartet had, and was part of this team to just bring this together and create a very emotionally powerful experience where a reader, like the Thai reader, would read something, and then we'd go straight into like the Shostakovich performance, and then we'd go straight into another very intense piece, and then go straight into something else. So it was a very impactful night that I was somehow able to participate in, which was fantastic. And so that experience of curating and bringing the creative aspect in exploring like the multiple homes, again, going back to the concept of international meaning among homes, but kind of flipping it from a diaspora perspective that I have several homes within me. The curating experience gave me the opportunity to combine the academic and the theoretical portion with my creative portion. And that was definitely a glimpse of something that I hope to continue doing in the future. And even recently, the last string quartet that was just here the week before spring break, the Elias String Quartet, gave me further glimpse of that actually happening. They all hail from the UK, but the most extraordinary thing that they did was their second violinist is Scottish, and we had a folk improv session. And the thing is, classical musicians usually cannot improv. We like having sheet music in front of us, but he was like, no sheet music, just follow me, and I'm not even gonna type for the tempo, just go for it, and just improv, here's the chord, go for it. And I think there were two parts to that folk improv session. The first one in which the second violinist shared his culture with us. So he showed us, he explained, this is Scottish traditional music. I will sing some things in Gaelic. I will show you how it works. We'll go into the dance. And then he opened it up for us. He said, I would like, now let's collaborate together. And it was very unique in that it wasn't even like, here they are and we're this like rectangular audience. It was actually a massive circle. So there was this space that was just created where, you know, he's presenting this culture, we can engage in the culture, and then we can also partake in just engaging and like participating in it. And that was really inspiring for me because that again was a glimpse of like, oh, I could maybe do something like this in the future. And so on top of all this that's been happening, I've also been in contact with the second violinist of the Kiara String Quartet, who is also Korean American, and she introduced me to this topic called madang. And madang literally is just open space. It's a courtyard in a Korean traditional home where people would talk, they would have debates, there would be rituals. It was a community space. But the unique thing about madang is similar to how the folk session went, it was a circle. There are no lines between the performer and the audience. There's no us, them. It's very much, if you want to participate, you can. You can like give your vocalization, you can run in, you can participate in it. And for her, because she was a performer, she was like, that's what I want to pursue. I want to create this space where there is no us and them, and it's just anyone can participate and anyone is free to participate. On top of that, she added a definition from a member of the Silk Road Ensemble who is also diasporic and who defined home as being a space where one can freely express them true selves. And so she combined that aspect of home as a place for free expression with the concept of madang, where there is no boundary line, to create this framework that helped her best understand what it meant to be a member of diaspora, what it meant to be Korean American, what it meant to have these multiple homes within her. And so that was kind of a long road that I took you down. But back to the prompt, which is the relevance of my international experiences. And I guess to that, because I did kind of give my own definition, because international is different for me because of who I am. I think for me, the relevance of my international experience, which ironically actually took place mostly in Iowa City, is that through those experiences, in connecting with the people who just passed through Iowa City, I have been given a taste of this madang influence. In other words, I've been given a taste of wanting to create this space to explore multiple homes within and also beyond people. Thank you.
Our third speaker is Rachel Maji. She's also an international studies major. Her focus is in South and East Asian studies, and she has a minor in global health and a certificate in sustainability. Her international travels include study abroad and interning in India, as well as traveling to France, Mexico, the Bahamas, and Canada. She's studied French, Mandarin, and Hindi here at the University of Iowa. As you've already heard, she's recently been awarded a Fulbright. She'll use it to conduct research on breast and cervical cancer knowledge and perception in India. And her hope is to pursue a master's in public health. Please help me to welcome Rachel.
It's so cool to be up here. I've interned with the Iowa City Foreign Relations Council for over 3 years, so for once I'm up here and I'm not, sitting up with Lauren and Jocko and Laura and Ed and Tanner and Kyle and anyway, all of my friends. And let me just say, I'm so proud of these two. I love them to death, and their speeches made me very emotional. So here's hoping I can hold it together for my own. All right. When asked what I wanted to be when I grew up as a kid, my answer was not always a global public health researcher that implements qualitative studies in order to develop health education interventions towards at-risk groups. I wanted to be an author, though at the time my writing involved more mythical creatures and less qualitative data analysis. Honestly, before writing this speech and thus indulging in a bit of introspection, nothing particularly stood out about my childhood that would have predicted my standing up here before you all, speaking about my experiences as an international studies student at the University of Iowa. Now I can see the little signs. I'd always enjoyed learning about the world. I looked forward to the social studies unit where we finally break free of American and European history and learn about ancient empires in South America and the Middle East, about religions I'd never seen in practice, from Islam in Turkey to Buddhism in Japan. I remember being particularly intrigued by Hinduism, ironically enough. After all, their colorful festivals and multi-limbed deities were so much different and much more interesting than the seemingly endless weeks of Lent and strictly two-armed Jesus Christ. That is so reminiscent of my Roman Catholic upbringing. I've also always had a love for maps and globes. Granted, my interest in geography started as a way to compete with my equally enthusiastic younger brother. Actually, over spring break, we spent all dinner quizzing each other on capitals in different parts of the world. That's how we bond. But that skill has served me well since. Oh, and of course, I dreamed of studying abroad in England, but you can ask any 15-year-old who grew up on Harry Potter and has seen Doctor Who, and they will tell you the same thing. So, despite all this, when I applied to the University of Iowa, I was not an international studies major. In fact, I had never heard of international studies. For most of my senior year in high school, I was dead set on English. Like I said, I wanted to be an author, and I applied to the University of Iowa with the hopes of eventually pursuing creative writing. And things could have very well stayed that way, because so rarely do we have this single defining moment that changes the entire course of our lives. And that sounds dramatic, but hear me out. Mine happened to occur on May 29th, 2013, less than 2 weeks before I graduated high school and roughly 3 months before I would begin school at the University of Iowa. Yes, I did rifle back through my emails to find the exact date. Friends, family, and even some faculty here know of the infamous Kate Harris and the role she has played in inspiring me to be where I am today. A writer, photographer, and researcher, Kate Harris swept me off my feet with images and stories of her experience cycling the Silk Road from Turkey to India when she visited my tiny high school in Kohler, Wisconsin. It's here that I feel the need to plug her book, Land of Lost Borders, which was only just published earlier this year, and I enjoyed it immensely, but then again, I might be a bit biased. Sometimes I wonder where I would be right now if I had stayed home sick during that particular high school assembly. I would not have hesitated in front of the computer as other students in my orientation group registered for introduction to English. I wouldn't have turned to my then freshman advisor and told her that I didn't want to study English anymore. I wouldn't have said, I want to learn about the world. Is there a major for that? I certainly wouldn't be speaking in front of you all, as I'm sure it was during an advising appointment with the wonderful Carmen Berger that I was prompted to apply to intern at the Iowa City Foreign Relations Council a little over 3 years ago. Needless to say, I fully embraced the International Studies program. After all, I've been fortunate to study in India twice as an undergraduate. The first was through the University of Iowa India Winterim program, which Professor Rajagopal spoke to this group about in fall 2016. I myself participated in the 2014-15 session when I traveled to Udaipur, Rajasthan as a student of Professor Uday Kumar's course on high-efficiency cook stoves. If you'll remember, Professor Uday also spoke to ICFRC alongside Jerry Anthony in spring 2017 on the same topic. My first trip to India really marks a watershed moment in my life. Like the Kate Harris talk, the trajectory of my life changed when I stepped off the plane in New Delhi over 3 years ago, as it's opened up so many opportunities for me since then. I also consider this program my first experience with global health, and with women's health, specifically in the context of India. Because when I returned to to class here at Iowa and discussed household air pollution, I now had faces and names to match those statistics. I had sat next to the women that my professor's slides had labeled at risk. I sat in their homes, my back against the blackened walls, while their children sat in my lap, and we all inhaled the same smoke that causes so many chronic respiratory diseases in women and young children that live in homes that burn wood for fuel. While still in Udaipur, I actually received an email from Carmen, who encouraged me to meet with one of my professors whose class I would be taking the following semester, Dr. Paul Greeno. I promise I'm not simply name-dropping past ICFRC speakers at this point. My world is just incredibly, incredibly small. Dr. Greeno was interested in reestablishing a relationship between the University of Iowa and the Swami Vivekananda Youth Movement, which is an NGO based in Mysore, Karnataka. After applying for the position and working tirelessly on a research project all spring, I returned to India in June 2015 as one of 2 highly motivated guinea pigs. Under SVIM founder Dr. Balu, I helped create metrics for human and social capital indicators observed at SVIM's rural project sites. If you're interested in exactly what that means, I encourage you to come chat with me after the talk. As a side note, by the way, this program now exists as the Development in a Global Context course here at the UI, and I highly encourage any interested global health students to speak with Carmen or Dr. Christopher Squire about participating next academic school year. To continue, during my field stay during this research position, I stayed in rural Hosahali at the Viveka Tribal Center for Learning, one of SVIM's schools that provides primary and secondary education to children living in the area. Again, when I returned to my global health coursework and read about level of education completed as a social determinant of health, I could once again put faces and names to the individuals that SVIM was directly benefiting through their projects. I could think about the lively group of girls who ambushed me while I was transcribing an interview with the school superintendent and began an impromptu lesson in Kannada, the regional language, with me as their unsuspecting student. As someone who would like to continue researching global health in the future, these kinds of interpersonal experiences are essential. Forming meaningful relationships with people and communities involved in your research has the capacity to grant you a greater understanding of your role as a researcher, beyond what the institutional review boards will tell you. Now when I read about household air pollution or malnutrition or diarrheal diseases, I think about Kaju, a 3-year-old girl who lived in one of the homes where we tested high-efficiency cook stoves and who offered to let me hold her baby goat. The moment I began thinking about Kaju and all the other people I met while studying in India, before I thought about whether this information was going to be on the midterm, I took one step closer to becoming the researcher and the academic that I really want to be in the future. The ability to put faces and names to statistics reminds you, startlingly so, about your actions as a researcher and how they have real consequences, good and bad, within the communities that you're attempting to serve. I've been fortunate enough to receive an opportunity to return to India for a 3rd time, as was mentioned a few times. I'm really thankful, as a Fulbright Narrows student researcher beginning in August of this year. This grant will allow me to work with SVIM again at the Vivekananda Memorial Hospital in rural Sargor, as well as St. John's National Academy of Health Sciences in urban Bangalore. I will be conducting qualitative research on perceptions of breast and cervical cancer in these communities through the use of individual interviews and focus group sessions. Hopefully, I will return to speak more to you about that during the annual Fulbright awardee ICFRC talk in July. To say that my ability as a researcher will be put to the test is an understatement. I promise I'm already working hard on filling out paperwork to receive research clearance, and I'm communicating with professors here and my mentors abroad in India to formulate an effective and appropriate research methodology. My hopes for the research is to gather a base of data and write up my preliminary findings for both my host affiliations so that they may use the data to create sustainable health education interventions to address breast and cervical cancer in their communities. In an ideal world, I will be able to return to these communities and help implement these interventions as I continue to pursue my future PhD and MPH studies. So please cross your fingers. To end my section of the talk, I wanted to read a small excerpt from an email I sent Kate Harris after returning from my orientation here at the University of Iowa almost 5 years ago. Suddenly, I feel excited about starting classes and finally learning about the world that I want to help and change for the better. I realized that if I could understand the world I live in outside of Kohler, outside of Wisconsin, and outside of the United States, maybe I could actually do something. Though I'm not quite sure what that is yet, I think I'm taking steps in the right direction. As a student and as a future researcher, I am constantly trying to understand this world we live in, and I hope I never reach a point where I believe I have nothing more to learn. Thank you.
First note I got actually is a comment, not a question, but I'd like to share it with you. It is advice for all our speakers. They should develop their sense of humor. Always good to have a good sense of humor.
It doesn't feel like a compliment.
It is actually a compliment. I would not have read it. And the question for all three, first question for all three is, what do you do in your spare time?
Yeah, sure. These two are going to hate me for saying this, but in my spare time, and this has been like a novelty of this year, I've grown unusually close to the other ICFRC interns. So an unusual, like, large amount of time through my week has been enjoyed just like hanging out with them. Sometimes we go study. Yeah. Sometimes we go study together. Sometimes we just hang out. We'll watch movies or whatever. So I say it's a novelty because, like, in previous years, like, it hasn't quite been that way. So that's all I have to say.
So for me, at first I was like jokingly gonna say, what is spare time? But I do have spare time. So I think for me, I like to listen to a lot of music. So I like generally walk around just listening to new music using Spotify. I also do spend a lot of time doing stuff for said Dashi project. So whether it's like arranging a cover, writing an original song, or doing a mashup, that's what I like to do in my spare time. I'm often at Voxman, just like in a practice room playing on the piano anyway. And I guess, I don't know, talking with my friends. I can't really think of anything else, but definitely music takes a big chunk of my spare time. So.
Spare time, what a concept. A lot of my spare time, I don't think this really counts, but I've been working really hard on my Fulbright paperwork. So that's like what I generally do in my spare time. But the fun things I do in my spare time, listen to a lot of music as well. I watch a lot of Survivor on Hulu. Shout out to Tony, who also wants to be on Survivor with me in a couple of years. And like Daniel said, the ICFRC interns, we're a really close group of people, so we spend a lot of our time chatting with each other and hanging out on the weekends, and just in general making really, really great memories. And that's part of the reason why I cherish this internship, and I spend a lot of my time here as well. So thanks.
Next question I had is, how did these three meet? How did you meet?
Oh, no.
She jumped right up.
Daniel Valentin. So we met during as interns. So I started interning in spring 2015, and both of these interns started interning in fall 2015. So we met through ICFRC, and I have a particular memory of Daniel from when he very first started. You see the flags on your tables. One of us has to do that every morning. And during cleanup, Daniel would come to me without fail, as I was always the one who set them up. Without fail, would come over and antagonize me about some arbitrary way I'd set them up. And back then, I was like, who is this annoying new intern who thinks he can just come up to me and say things that I honestly did not know how to respond to at the time. But last summer, as the trivia cards say, we became really good friends, bonding over the Fulbright process. So, and now I consider that annoying new intern one of my best friends. So,
So for me, I joined, and I don't really remember. I think what it was is I first got closer to Rachel because we actually both took Chinese class together. And that was very kind of serendipitous. I think we were in the office just talking about our schedule. That's what a lot of students do, like, oh, what are you taking next semester? And it turned out that we were in the exact same section as well. So we spent a lot of time in Phillips Hall right next door preparing for our Chinese dialogues and whatnot. And then I think just like the longer we stayed at ICFRC, setting up and tearing down, you know, Daniel would be going off about the flags or something, and then we'd go right back at him or whatever. And kind of like that sense of very strong camaraderie was established. So, yes.
In my defense. No, I don't think there's anything more to add.
Next question is, what is your ideal job/career path? I think we had some inkling of that, but if you want to add anything to that at this point.
Sure. Voice actor has nothing to do with international studies. But yeah, no, ever since I was a kid, ever since my brothers and I would watch cartoons on Saturday mornings or, you know, Disney movies or stuff like that, we were all genuinely curious, who is behind this character? And so we would, thanks to the new like internet, we could actually go and like figure this stuff out, and we spend a lot of our time you know, like making these connections. Like this voice actor does like all these different kinds of voices, and you can learn about the person. And so I just think that would be a lot of fun. So I think hopefully someday I could be a voice actor.
So for me, I kind of mentioned it at the end of my speech. I would like to like continue being, I guess like a bridge, or I'll try. Okay, I'm not gonna use a metaphor. So I would like to just be someone who connects people together. So because I kind of have these interesting backgrounds where like I was very much in the science field, and then now I'm in the humanities field. Like I know how to create those conversations between the two. Or like I know like classical music, but I also know quote unquote lowbrow popular music, so I know how to bridge the two, and like even like Western cultures and Eastern cultures. So I would like to be in a position where I can link those two together. Right now, I guess that kind of looks like, you know, like I said, potentially, I don't know if I said that, but like potentially being in a cultural or like an arts organization. And while I'm doing that, I would like to just continue creating my own work, whether that's poetry and or actually probably both music. So just being in a position where I'm really connecting people together, encouraging these collaborations, but also creating my own work.
Like I said, I want to be a global public health researcher, but I'd also really love to be a professor at a university someday. And that's kind of the formal answer. But I also, given that, as I mentioned in my talk, how important Kate Harris was to me, about just like that one moment, that one speech that really inspired me just to flip my whole plan kind of on its head. My real kind of goal is to be the Kate Harris for someone else. Is sort of my goal. Yeah.
Nice.
Thanks.
Another question that some of them have already addressed in part, but I'll just make sure we have, if they want to add anything, and that is, what was your most impactful connection you made while abroad?
This is, I don't know if it's necessarily the most, but this was one that made me stop and think a bit. So my freshman year, I studied abroad in China. And it was really interesting because there were a lot of like Korean students there, like who studied university in Korea and then were then studying abroad in China. And it was just interesting because like I just became labeled as the Korean American. I'm like, yo, you're the Korean American. I'm like, yes, I am. But I think it was interesting because later on, I like, as I was walking to school, I had someone come up to me and talk to me, and he said like, it was weird because he said like, I've never met a Korean American before. And I was like, hi. Okay, but it was really interesting because like, so there is definitely, as a Korean American or like a member of Korean diaspora, kind of this outside perspective where it's like, oh, where are you from? But then on top of that, there's also this like intra-ethnic segregation-ish or like identification that's happening where it's like Korean versus Korean American and this very, very distinct identification. And so with that person, I've definitely had some interesting conversations, like him asking like, why don't all Korean Americans speak Korean fluently? And I'm like, because we don't... We go to school and that's all in English. So usually it's one extreme or the other. Like you get home and you only speak Korean, or you know, your parents are more lax on it. And that's definitely a theme that goes across all hyphenated American identities. Like if you're Kenyan American, if you're Indian American, that's something that goes across all of that. But it was very interesting because that was the first time a Korean person asked me about that, like that explicitly, and I've had some very good conversations because of it. So.
I have a nice short one. Her name is Kautar Lashabi, and she was somebody I met in the last few days of my study abroad in Morocco. She was just another student, just a Moroccan student, and I remember, the first time I met her, she just like walked right up to me, like hands behind her back, smiling, and I was like, yes. Let's practice together. And so, we would talk, and I think I said, أحب أتكلم اللغة العربية. Like, I love talking in Arabic. And she was like, can you say that again? أحب أتكلم اللغة العربية. The first one. أحب. أحب. No one was more crushed when I didn't get the Fulbright. She was very sad and very emotional, but I assured her one day I will come back and we will meet up.
There's a reason besides the fact that I've already been to India twice, that I applied for Fulbright back in India. And it's because people in India that I've met have been some of the most like compassionate and caring and wonderful people I've ever met. When I was interning with SUIM, the first thing that they would ask us was, have you had your breakfast? And if we didn't, then there would immediately be food. Another one was at our field stays, my co-intern, who has the other guinea pig I was there with, was having just some, bowel troubles, as occasionally happens. And she asked one of the doctors, anything she could do to kind of get things moving. And soon enough, the next day, everyone knew about it. Everyone wanted to help her. Everyone was like, have you had enough water? Do you need water? Here's a banana. Here's this Ayurvedic medicine, because we're staying in an Ayurvedic hospital, that sort of thing. So, and the last is when I was in Rajasthan, we were at this home where they did henna on your arm, and we're like, okay, we're here, so that's stereotypical. Let's do it. And all of a sudden, the son of one of the women who was doing it was having a kind of a birthday party. It was a birthday party, and we were all invited. Complete strangers, didn't know our names. We had been there for a half hour, and they invited us into their home, sat us down, fed us cake, asked us questions, all of that sort of thing. And so it's those experiences, just everyone being so genuinely invested in forming friendships with you, that really, has inspired me to want to go back to India and, deepen those relationships and hold on to them for a long time.
Okay, lastly, we'll just get maybe one word answer from each of our speakers. Where do you want to travel next? You can say why, too.
Okay. I would actually like to go to Japan. And I think for me, a long-running dream of mine is to learn 3 Western language, like the 3 most commonly spoken Western languages and 3 most commonly spoken Eastern languages, and especially in East Asia, where the histories are so intertwined, it just kind of makes sense. And so I eventually do want to learn Japanese and go to Japan, and hopefully only go to Japan when I can at least have a conversation in Japanese. So.
Thank you.
I really want to go to China. Like Ashley mentioned, we both studied Mandarin together for about a year. I'm just very interested in the culture there, and my dad has been traveling there since the 90s for work. And he has come back with all these pictures and stories, and he talks endlessly about the food and and the people there. So if I were to go to one place right now, it would be China.
I want to go to the United Arab Emirates. I only got to be in the Abu Dhabi airport for a couple hours. And there was so much there. There was so much to see. And I had heard so many stories from former Arabic professors about, what life is like in the Gulf. And, it's like once you're there, you can go anywhere in the Gulf, like basically, like maybe, if the geopolitics are okay.
Would you help me to recognize again our 3 speakers? I want to thank our sponsors again, the University of Iowa's International Programs, University of Iowa's Honors Program, University of Iowa Public Policy Center, Stanley UI Foundation Support Organization for their support. Also our special sponsors today, Janet Linus, John Wadsworth, Ed Zastro. And we again thank City Channel 4 for making our programs available for our viewing audiences, and of course we can't let our speakers go. So, as a small token of our appreciation, speakers, we present you with the coveted Iowa City Foreign Relations Council mug sample. Thank you again for joining us. We are adjourned.